Nathan, her only son, threw the plate. It shattered against the wall, a scream in ceramic. "You're evicting your own family?" he shouted. Linda stared at him, calm. "I'm reclaiming what I paid for." His wife grabbed the paperwork, but it was too late. The house was sold. The mother they underestimated? Gone for good. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The sound of eggs hitting the frying pan used to mean comfort. These days, it just meant Linda was in someone's way again. She moved quietly around the kitchen, her slippers barely brushing the tile, careful not to drip water from the rinse she'd just done on her coffee mug. Nathan's wife, Erica, was standing exactly where the creamer used to be, now repurposed into a space for her gut-healing smoothies. Linda reached past her carefully. "Morning," she offered. Erica didn't respond, just flipped a page of her phone's calendar and sighed like she'd inherited a burden. Linda took her mug back to the guest room. She wasn't sure when she'd started calling it that. It used to be the sewing room, then the den. Now it was a beige square with a twin bed, a short dresser, and one window she rarely opened. The house she'd helped them buy had plenty of space, just none for her. Down the hallway, Nathan's voice rose suddenly. "I mean, it's not even that much. A third of the bills? She missed 1 month and acts like she's being evicted." Erica responded, low but sharp. "We have enough going on without playing social workers in our own home." Linda froze mid-step. She hadn't told them she could hear through the vent in the hallway closet. She just hadn't stopped listening. "She sold her condo for us," Nathan continued. "We said she could stay as long as she needed." "No," Erica snapped. "You said that. I said temporary." Linda walked back to her room, mug still full. Later that day, Nathan appeared in her doorway with a soft knock and a spreadsheet. "I just wanted to clarify what utilities break down to monthly," he said, not unkindly, but with that accountant's tone he'd picked up since getting promoted. She looked at the sheet. Numbers in blue, her name underlined. "I missed 1 payment," she said evenly. He smiled awkwardly. "I know. It's just better if we all stay on track. It's about respect." Respect. She looked at her son's face and remembered when he used to ask her to check under his bed for monsters, when he cried because the school bus was late and he thought he'd been left behind. "Right," she said. "Respect." The conversation ended there. By the end of the week, the thermostat had a code, the laundry detergent was moved to their bathroom, and Linda's almond milk started disappearing, only to be replaced with a post-it. "Buy your own next time, please. E." Linda didn't cry. Not then. She pulled out an old notebook and began writing things down. April 4th, Nathan called rent a dignity issue. April 6th, Erica said, "She's lucky we let her stay." April 7th, thermostat now locked, living room off limits after 9. She added a line under it, "I am not a tenant. I am their blood." That night, dinner was quiet. Pasta, no sauce. Erica claimed it was detox week. Nathan scrolled his phone while Linda chewed in silence. She glanced at the wall. Photos of their wedding, their daughter's soccer trophies, a frame that used to hold her and Harold's wedding picture, now filled with a generic farmhouse quote, "Gratitude turns what we have into enough." She sipped her water. They didn't ask her how her day was, didn't mention the book she'd left on the counter about grief support groups. No one asked why she hadn't left her room until noon. That's when she knew. This wasn't a home. It was a waiting room, for her to vanish politely. After they went to bed, Linda sat on the back porch alone and texted one person she hadn't spoken to in months. "Linda, Carol, is that real estate lawyer you once mentioned still practicing?" The dots danced. Then came the reply. "Carol, he is." "Why?" Linda stared into the dark, one slipper tapping against the wood grain. Linda. "No reason. Yet." The post-it notes multiplied like mold. One showed up on the butter dish. "Use sparingly. This isn't the Ritz." Another on the washer. "Full loads only. Not your personal laundromat." One particularly vicious one was taped to the bathroom mirror. "Please wipe counters. We all live here." Linda stared at it, toothbrush in hand. We all live here. But some lived more equally than others. She began keeping a second notebook, this one smaller, easier to hide in her purse. Each entry began the same way: the date, the offense, and a single sentence about how it made her feel. April 10th. Erica served 2 chicken breasts, no sides, none for me. April 12th. Nathan snapped, "You've had a lot of grace already." April 13th. She locked the thermostat to 63. At night, on purpose, in the space beneath, she simply wrote, "I feel erased." That afternoon, Linda pulled down an old photo album from her closet shelf, the one with the blue velvet binding she hadn't touched in years. She sat cross-legged on the twin bed, flipping through pages that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and forgotten joy. There was Nathan, 17, wearing a borrowed cap and gown, his tassel crooked, his grin unguarded. She remembered how she'd taken a second job at the high school just to help cover tuition deposits after Harold passed. She used to walk campus grounds with a clipboard so Nathan wouldn't feel alone. Every scholarship form, every FAFSA, she'd filled out with shaking hands and prayers. Back then, he'd called her Warrior Mom. Now he sent her Venmo requests labeled Utilities Share. The next day, Carol called. "You still breathing over there?" she joked, but her tone had gravity. Linda sat at the edge of the bed, watching a sunbeam slide across the carpet. "Barely. You ever feel like you've been slowly replaced in your own life?" "All the time," Carol said, "usually by people who smile while doing it." Linda laughed softly, then went quiet. "I think," she finally said, "they've decided I'm disposable." There was a pause. Then, "Meet me Thursday. That lawyer I told you about, Jim Rollins, he's discreet, sharp too. He handled your paperwork, remember?" "I remember," Linda said. "I just never thought I'd need him again." 2 days later, she slipped out while Nathan was at work and Erica was at Pilates. She dressed in slacks and a soft cardigan Harold once bought her, the one she never wore because Erica said it looked dated. Jim Rollins had an office tucked above a dry cleaner, the kind of place that didn't advertise but never went out of business. He still remembered her. "You're not on the deed alone," he said, flipping through the old files she'd brought. "But based on your financial contribution and the timing of the down payment, this isn't a rental arrangement. You're a co-owner." Linda blinked. "Even though they've been paying the mortgage?" "Partial payments don't override equity," he said. "Especially not if your investment was foundational, and based on these receipts, you never signed away rights. Not formally, not legally." She sat very still. "You're not stuck, Linda," Jim added gently. "You're just quieter than most people realize. That can change." When she got home, no one asked where she'd been. No one noticed that her coat smelled faintly of starch and legal pads. Erica left a cold-pressed juice on the counter with a sticky note, "Not for sharing, gut detox." Linda peeled it off slowly, folded it in half, tucked it into her smaller notebook. Later that night, she sat on her bed, laptop open, and began a private folder titled Plan B in case Grace runs out. She clicked save, then closed her eyes. From the hallway, she could hear the sound of forks clinking against china. Erica had made steak. None for Linda. She hadn't even asked. Linda opened her eyes. "Let them forget me," she thought. "I remember everything." The morning light spilled across the kitchen floor like it always had, warm and indifferent. Linda stood at the sink, rinsing out her teacup with slow, deliberate movements. She watched the way the water circled the drain, the sound oddly comforting in its predictability. Everything else in her life lately felt like it had been rewritten in a language she only partially understood, one where courtesy meant calculation and home meant occupancy by permission. Nathan passed behind her without saying anything, headed straight for the fridge. He reached in, pulled out a protein drink and muttered, "We're thinking of redoing the floors. Erica wants to brighten it up in here." Linda turned, her hands still damp, her voice quiet. "Oh?" He didn't look up as he peeled off the cap. "Yeah, laminate probably, and maybe knock down the half wall by the dining room. Open up the space more." She gave a small nod and dried her hands on a towel. He didn't ask what she thought. He didn't even pretend to. Just as he hadn't asked about the kitchen tiles she had chosen 3 years ago when she transferred the bulk of her condo sale into their down payment. She remembered walking through the aisles of that hardware store with him, how he'd held up paint swatches and asked, "Do you think this feels like home?" Apparently, it had only needed to feel like home for two. She said nothing. Just returned to her room and sat at the edge of her bed, the guest mattress sagging slightly in the center. The folder Jim Rollins had given her still sat in the bottom drawer of her dresser, beneath a stack of winter scarves and an old shawl that smelled faintly of rose oil. When she opened it, the facts stared up at her in clean, sharp type. Owner of record, Linda May Holloway. 50% equity stake contribution, $214,900 initial cash deposit, no formal buyout or ownership transfer filed. The rest of the paperwork confirmed it. Legally, she was not a guest, not a tenant, not a dependent. She was half the reason this house existed at all. But power, she was learning, did not always come from paperwork. Sometimes it came from noise, from certainty, from the sheer audacity of someone else's assumption. Nathan and Erica had made plenty of noise lately. Linda closed the folder, slid it back beneath the scarves, and leaned against the dresser for a long moment. Her breath came out slower than she expected, like her body had known something for weeks before her mind caught up. In the hallway, she could hear Erica laughing through a phone call. "It's just easier if we make the decisions, you know. She doesn't really need to be involved in the planning process." Linda stared at the door. There was no mention of walls coming down in any planning process she'd been invited to. No consultation, no respect. Only statements delivered like favors. She was beginning to see it clearly. They did not see her as part of this life. They saw her as an obligation they were trying to budget around. That evening, she set the table with 3 forks instead of 4. Erica frowned when she noticed. "I just assumed you'd be doing your reading in your room again," she said, her tone tight. Linda smiled gently, almost sweetly. "I can set another place if that's a problem." "No," Erica replied, blinking. "It's fine." They ate in silence, the scrape of silverware louder than any conversation. Nathan mentioned laminate again, and Erica nodded, already talking about open shelving and brushed brass handles. Linda listened. She smiled at the right parts. But her mind had already started drawing blueprints of a different kind. That night she returned to her notebook. Her handwriting was slow, precise. April 16th. "They're renovating what I helped build," without asking. She added a second line underneath it, then underlined it twice. "Maybe it's time to do a little demolition of my own." It started with an envelope slipped under her door. Not mailed, not spoken about. Just there, tucked beneath the beige trim of her bedroom, folded too neatly to be anything but rehearsed. Linda stared at it for a long time before picking it up. The paper was warm from the hallway vent. A spreadsheet printed on plain white copy paper. Numbers circled, totals underlined, the heading in Nathan's overly tidy font. Utility back pay, January-April. A note was scribbled in the corner in blue ink. "We understand times are tough, but we need this caught up. Please review and let us know if you'll be signing the lease by Friday." Signing the lease. She had to read it 3 times before it registered. Not only were they asking for money, but they were also trying to convert her presence into a legal liability, complete with a tenant's lease, drafted without her name on the title. She hadn't even been given the courtesy of a conversation. That evening at dinner, Erica was unusually chipper. "We've started interviewing painters," she said casually, dabbing at her lips with a napkin. "We're going to lighten up the entryway. Too much beige can make a place feel dated." Linda stirred her soup. It was from a can. She knew because she'd seen the open tin in the trash before Erica could hide it. Nathan cleared his throat. "We also thought a lease would help protect everyone. Just something basic. Expectations and boundaries. It's pretty common these days." Linda nodded slowly, as if considering. "I'll take a look," she said. "Of course." She said it gently, graciously, like it hadn't cracked something loose inside her. That night, she texted Carol. "Linda, you once said you knew someone quiet. A realtor. Still true?" Carol replied almost instantly, "Very true. Want me to make the call?" Linda, "Please, discretion matters." The next morning, Linda spent nearly 2 hours in her room with a calculator. 2 bank statements, and the folder from Jim Rollins. She double-checked every figure she could find: her original deposit, the equity timeline, the home's appraised value from 2 years ago, and what similar houses in the neighborhood had sold for in the past 6 months. The numbers weren't just encouraging, they were liberating. By noon, Carol had texted back with a name: Tricia Feldman. Works fast, doesn't ask questions she doesn't need answers to. Linda saved the contact and sent a short introductory message. A few minutes later, her phone rang. Tricia's voice was calm, no nonsense, and warm in the way that didn't pretend. "I understand you're not on a timeline, but you're under pressure." Linda smiled faintly. "That's exactly right. Then let's get you options." Later that afternoon, while Nathan was working from the sunroom and Erica was out getting new curtain samples, Linda opened the hallway closet and pulled down the green box labeled Photos, pre-2010. It had lived on the top shelf untouched for years, but she knew every picture by heart. She sat on her twin bed, opening one album after another. Nathan's first birthday, cake smeared across his cheek, her arms around him, Harold off to the side laughing with his whole face, family vacations, backyard barbecues, a photo of the 3 of them seated on the porch of their first apartment, chairs rusted but spirits high. None of the pictures were recent, none of them included Erica, and none captured the woman she was now. She held a photo from Nathan's high school graduation in her hands. Her fingers trembled just slightly. "I was always your home," she whispered. But what she didn't say, what she couldn't quite let go of, was that this house had never returned the favor. She packed the album away again. Then, carefully, she tore the lease draft in half and placed it in the fireplace, not bothering to light it, just left it there, like a dare. That night she added a new entry to her notebook. April 19th. "They want me gone, but not until I leave them my share." She underlined it, then added a second line. "They don't know yet. I'm the one making the exit plan." The next morning, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror and smoothed her blouse. Her reflection stared back. Not broken, not erased, just resolved. She had an appointment with Tricia in an hour, and she intended to be early. The doorbell rang just after 11. Linda was seated at the kitchen table, her coffee cooling untouched beside a yellow legal pad filled with tiny check marks. A light breeze stirred the curtain, but she didn't flinch. She already knew who it would be. She stood, smoothed her blouse, and opened the front door like she'd been expecting the day for years. "Ms. Holloway?" the man asked, stepping forward with a crisp binder and a camera slung over his shoulder. "Tricia said you'd be ready." Linda smiled. "Come in, Daniel." His shoes were clean, quiet against the hardwood as he moved inside, scanning the layout. Professional eyes, no wasted motion. The moment his camera clicked, a voice echoed down the hallway. "Excuse me, who are you?" Nathan rounded the corner, still in his slippers and a faded university t-shirt, blinking like someone yanked too fast from a dream. His gaze landed on the camera, then on Linda, then back again. "Mom, what the hell is this? Who is this man?" Daniel looked up, polite but unbothered. "Apologies. I'm with Feldman Realty, just here to take listing photos." Nathan's mouth dropped. "Listing?" Linda stepped forward gently, her hands clasped in front of her. "He's here for the property." "Our property?" Nathan stared at her, blinking. "What do you mean, our? What's going on?" Linda inhaled slowly, the kind of breath that steadied the ground beneath your feet. "I mean, I never sold my half, Nathan. I never signed it away. And since you two have made it clear I'm a guest here, well, it's time the house had new hosts." For a moment, all Nathan could do was stare. The words didn't make sense to him. He kept blinking, trying to reorder reality, but the pieces no longer fit. "You're selling the house?" Linda's voice didn't rise. "It's already in escrow." Behind them, Erica's voice rang out from the stairs. "What do you mean, escrow? What is going on?" She came down in yoga pants and fury, phone in hand, recording. "Are you filming in my house? You need permission to film in someone's house." "It's not just yours," Linda said calmly. "And no, we don't." Erica turned to Nathan, breath sharp. "Tell me this is a joke." Nathan opened his mouth, then closed it again. Linda stepped between them, never raising her voice. I gave you months. I gave you silence. But now I'm giving you notice. You wouldn't dare, Erica hissed. Linda met her eyes. I already did. Nathan looked pale. You're evicting us? I'm removing myself, she replied. You just happened to be standing where I invested. Daniel continued taking photos. The click of his shutter now sounded like punctuation marks. This can't be legal, Erica muttered, scrolling furiously through her phone. It's entirely legal, Linda replied. But you're welcome to have your own attorney confirm. In the meantime, you'll receive formal notice from Escrow. Closing is in 3 weeks. There was silence, a heavy one, like dust settling after a ceiling caves in. Daniel finished his pass through the downstairs and gave a polite nod. I'll let Trisha know we're good to go. Linda walked him to the door. As it closed behind him, Erica let out a sharp laugh. You're insane. You think anyone's going to buy this place out from under us without knowing what a viper you are? Linda turned slowly. Oh, they already know. I told them the story myself. The part where I sold my condo to help my son, only to be billed for butter and punished with silence. They liked it. You're going to ruin this family, Nathan whispered. No, Linda said gently. You already did. I'm just packing the receipts. She turned toward the kitchen, her mug still on the table, coffee now cold. Behind her, Erica sank onto the couch, phone still clenched in her hand. Nathan remained standing, as if moving would confirm it was real. Linda picked up her mug. Her fingers brushed the edge of the legal pad. She added one more check mark, then crossed out the words at the top, contingency plan, and wrote beneath it, execution. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like cinnamon rolls. Linda stepped in, cautious, as if crossing into someone else's dream. A full pot of fresh coffee sat on the warmer. A clean mug, her mug, waited beside it. Next to that, a plate with a warm pastry and a sticky note in Erica's looping cursive. For you, since you've had a rough week. Rough week. Linda almost laughed, but instead, she blinked twice and smiled faintly, as if touched. She picked up the roll and brought it to the table, letting it rest on a napkin she never unwrapped. Nathan walked in a moment later, hair slicked back, the slight hint of aftershave trailing behind him like a flag of good intentions. Hey, Mom, he said lightly. Did you sleep okay? She looked up slowly. Best in weeks. He nodded, like this made sense. We were thinking maybe a family dinner this weekend, just us. Catch up, talk things through. Linda offered a soft smile. That sounds nice. He relaxed. She took a small bite of the roll. Too sweet. Too obvious. She swallowed it anyway, then licked a dab of icing from her thumb, careful to make it look appreciative. After he left, Linda opened her phone and messaged Trisha. Linda, they're turning on the charm. Trisha. Classic. Escrow rattled them. Linda. Any risks? Trisha. If they contest before closing, yes. You need airtight backups. All of it. Linda. Already started. Trisha. Then let them play nice. But don't let your guard down, ever. By afternoon, Linda had lined up a notary visit, scanned her bank statements into a secure drive, forwarded Jim Rollins her updated affidavit, and set a PIN lock on her phone. She also printed out her power of attorney paperwork and placed it in an envelope marked, "In case of obstruction." She slid it beneath her mattress, right beside her folder titled Plan B. Late that evening, she found Erica in the kitchen, chopping herbs with deliberate care. The kitchen lights were dimmed, jazz humming low from the Bluetooth speaker. A candle flickered in the window like a set piece in a too-perfect play. Hey, Erica said, her tone syrupy. I was just thinking, maybe we could repaint your room? Something warmer, more inviting? Linda tilted her head. That's thoughtful. You've just been through so much, Erica continued, not quite meeting her eyes. It's no wonder you're feeling reactive. Reactive? Linda echoed gently. I mean, all this legal stuff. Escrow, realtors walking through like you're flipping a foreclosure. She paused, knife still in hand. We don't want this to get ugly, Linda. Of course not, Linda said. That's why I hired a lawyer before I filed anything. Erica blinked. I'm not confused, Linda added softly. I'm prepared. The knife stilled against the cutting board. Erica turned. Her smile was gone. You do this. You're out of our lives. Linda stepped forward. You keep saying that like it's a threat, but from where I'm standing it sounds like freedom. For a beat, neither woman moved. Then Erica turned back to her chopping, more forceful this time. Nathan's trying to fix this. He still believes this can be salvaged. Linda's voice was calm. Then he believes in ghosts. Erica didn't respond. That night, Linda lay in bed, her fingers tracing the stitched edges of her notebook. She added one more entry. April 22nd. They remembered I'm human. Only after realizing I'm powerful. She underlined the final sentence twice. They've underestimated the quiet one for the last time, and on her nightstand, next to her reading lamp, sat a new envelope. Sealed, initialed, stamped certified. The backup plan to the backup plan. Because kindness from cornered people wasn't kindness at all. It was bait. And Linda had stopped biting. The table was set with more effort than usual. Cloth napkins, a real tablecloth, wine glasses, even though Linda rarely drank anymore. A store-bought cheesecake rested awkwardly in the center like a hostage between courses. Erica had made roasted salmon and wild rice pilaf, dishes that screamed neutral effort, something that could be passed off as thoughtful without being personal. Nathan poured wine with practiced cheer. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. Linda raised hers, just a sip of seltzer with lemon. Actually, she said, tapping the rim lightly with her fingernail, before we toast, I have a small announcement, too. The air in the room cooled, almost audibly. Erica looked up from slicing the cheesecake. Nathan paused mid-sip. Linda placed her napkin gently on her lap and smiled. Escrow closed this morning. Silence. I've finalized the sale, she continued. You'll have 14 days to vacate. You'll receive official notice tomorrow. Nathan blinked. His glass wobbled slightly in his hand. Erica spoke first. Excuse? Linda didn't flinch. You heard me. Nathan slowly set his wine down. You're kidding. Linda met his eyes, calm and steady. Number, I've signed every document, wired every fee, notarized, filed, certified. It's done. The silence was broken by the sharp clatter of ceramic. Erica dropping the cheesecake knife onto the plate. The metal edge rang against porcelain like a warning bell. Nathan's voice dropped low. You're selling the house, out from under us. Linda cocked her head. Half of it was already mine. You treated it like a favor. I corrected the paperwork. He stood, so fast his chair legs screeched against the floor. We let you live here, he snapped. No, she said softly. You tolerated me, then tried to invoice me for the butter. Nathan's hands clenched. You can't legally force us out. We'll take this to court. Linda's smile was almost kind. You could try. But remember that waiver you signed when we set up the joint deed? The one Jim Rollins made you initial 3 times? Erica's face blanched. What waiver? Nathan's voice cracked. That was just for refinancing. No. Linda reached into her purse and slid out a single folded page. It was also a non-contest clause. You gave up the right to dispute future sale decisions in writing. You didn't read the fine print. Erica lunged forward, snatching the page, her eyes racing over it. This is insane. You tricked us. No, Linda replied. You ignored me. There's a difference. Then Nathan did something she hadn't seen since he was a teenager. He threw the plate. It hit the far wall, shattering in a spray of rice and ceramic and whatever dignity was still in the room. I gave you everything, he shouted. I cleaned up Dad's mess. I took care of things when you couldn't even get out of bed after he died. I buried him, Linda said, her voice still steady. And I still found a way to get you through school, through your first job, your first failed business. I sold my condo to buy you this life, and you repaid me with cold dinners and locked thermostats. Nathan's breathing was heavy now, the kind that came with the realization that no argument could unmake what had already been done. Erica crossed her arms. You'll regret this. Linda looked down at her glass. Number, I regretted staying silent for this long. For a moment, it was as if the whole house held its breath. Then Linda stood, smoothed her blouse, and placed her napkin on the table. "I won't be staying for dessert." She walked past the shards of broken plate, careful not to step on anything sharp. At the threshold of the hallway, she paused. "You have 14 days. Make them count." Upstairs, the guest room, the sewing room, the den, her cell, waited empty. Downstairs, the house seemed to lean in on itself, the way a body does when the soul quietly slips away. Back in her room, Linda opened her notebook and added, "April 23rd. The plate broke. So did the illusion." She drew a line beneath it, then circled one word: freedom. The first moving truck arrived at 9:02 a.m. sharp, its diesel grumble breaking the early morning stillness like a dare. Linda sat by the living room window, tea in hand, wrapped in a knit cardigan she hadn't worn in years. It still smelled faintly of lavender sachets and old church pews. From her vantage point, she could see Erica in the driveway, arms crossed, barking directions at two underpaid men trying to fit a sectional through the front door. Nathan wasn't far behind, hauling boxes labeled fragile, like they held fragments of his dignity. Linda didn't offer help. No one had asked. By noon, the dining room was half dismantled. The gallery wall, formerly lined with curated family photos and Pinterest-worthy quotes, now sat in a pile of mismatched frames on the carpet. One of them had cracked in the process. A photo of their daughter's 4th birthday, frosting on her cheeks, confetti in her curls. Linda had taken that picture. She rose and walked to the kitchen just as Nathan entered from the garage, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, catching his breath. "I was just trying to protect my family," he said finally, voice hoarse. Linda opened the fridge and poured herself a glass of water. She took her time answering. "From me?" she asked softly. "Or from having to admit you failed?" Nathan flinched. She didn't press. She didn't need to. He turned away, muttering something she couldn't quite hear, and disappeared down the hall. The boxes kept multiplying. Everywhere she looked, cardboard and tape and panic. Erica trying to argue with the moving guys about how the couch wouldn't fit in the storage unit. Nathan swearing under his breath when he knocked over a lamp. The energy of the house had shifted again. Less hostile now, but far more chaotic. Linda's phone buzzed. "Carol." "Outside. I brought something fizzy." She met her on the front porch, the sun warm against the wood. Carol held up a bottle of champagne with a mischievous, "Replaced your compass with her own." "I don't know when ambition became entitlement, but I do know you let it happen. You watched her diminish me in my own home and called it a phase. You forged my future with disappearing ink." She leaned forward slightly. "I still love you. That's the tragedy, I suppose. But I don't owe you sanctuary. I owe myself truth." Marilyn clicked the camera off. She pulled out a padded mailer and slipped the photograph inside, added a small note on monogrammed stationery. "You can keep this. The house won't miss you." She sealed it, addressed it, walked it to the mailbox. Back inside, the late light was pouring into the kitchen like honey. She made herself a soft cheese sandwich and ate it slowly, savoring the quiet. Across the table sat the camcorder, still warm, the tiny red light now dark. That night, she filed the video into a folder marked, "If They Try Again." Then she opened a second one, "If I Ever Forget." Just before bed, she walked down the hallway and past the empty picture hooks where family photos had once hung. She didn't fill them. Instead, she opened her drawer and pulled out the watch. Harold's. Still ticking. Still hers. As she slipped it on, she glanced toward the doorway and whispered, "Goodbye, baby." Not loud, but meant. The courtroom wasn't grand. It was one of those modern county courtrooms built for speed, not spectacle. Gray carpet, modular furniture, and that particular fluorescent buzz that made everyone look just a little bit guilty. But Marilyn entered with her head high and her hair done in a quiet updo. She wore navy, no black. She had mourned enough. Greg and Kelsey sat at the petitioner's table. Kelsey in beige, like someone auditioning for sincerity. Greg with a wrinkled folder and eyes that avoided everyone. Diane sat beside Marilyn, calm and precise, her briefcase already open, a tabbed binder in front of her like scripture. "All rise," the bailiff called. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with sharp cheekbones and the patience of a librarian, entered. Case number 4792, Owens v. Owens. Motion to declare Ms. Marilyn Owens mentally unfit and to challenge the transfer of property into an irrevocable charitable trust. The room settled. Kelsey's lawyer, young and eager, stood first. "Your Honor, we are here today because my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Owens, are deeply concerned about the mental well-being of Mr. Owens's elderly mother. They believe her recent legal decisions were not made with full capacity or clarity, and that undue influence or confusion may have affected the creation of this so-called trust." Marilyn didn't flinch. Diane stood. "Your Honor, we'll provide medical clearance from a licensed neuropsychologist dated within the past 30 days, stating Ms. Owens is in full cognitive health. We'll also submit financial ledgers spanning 20 years, her recent banking transfers, all executed independently, and a video statement made with time-stamped validation. And finally," she placed a flash drive on the table, a 27-second clip in which the petitioners openly joke about inheriting her home before they finish a bathroom renovation. Kelsey's lawyer objected. The judge waved it off. "I'll allow it, for tone, if nothing else." The flash drive played on the overhead screen. Laughter, lemon tart. Kelsey's voice, "At this rate, we'll inherit the house before we get the bathroom reno done." Then Marilyn, in the background. Silent, pouring wine, watching. The silence in the courtroom after the video cut was louder than the laughter had been. Greg sank deeper into his chair. Kelsey crossed her arms, eyes glinting with resentment. "Do you deny making that comment?" the judge asked. Kelsey straightened. "It was a joke. Context matters." Marilyn rose slowly. "May I speak?" The judge nodded. Marilyn walked forward. No notes, no papers, just her voice. "I was quiet for too long," she began. "I believed that being soft meant being good, that if I smiled through discomfort, they'd eventually see me." She turned slightly toward Greg. "I didn't raise you to lie. I raised you to think. But somewhere along the line, you let someone else think for you." Greg stared at the floor. "To be clear, I'm not confused. I'm not frail. I am, finally, resolute." She took a slow breath. "Being quiet got me hurt. Speaking up got me free." The judge leaned back. "Thank you, Ms. Owens. I've heard enough." She shuffled some papers. "This court finds no evidence of mental incompetence or coercion. All documents appear valid and executed properly. The trust will remain as filed." Greg closed his eyes. Kelsey stood too fast, knocking over her chair. "This isn't justice. It's elder manipulation in reverse. She's making a mockery of us." "No," the judge replied calmly. "She's just no longer afraid of you." Court adjourned. Outside, cameras waited. Not many, just a local station and a reporter from an elder rights blog. They asked Marilyn for a comment. She smiled politely. "No, thank you." But once she reached Diane's car, she paused. "Actually," she said, turning back to the reporter, "just one thing." The camera focused. "People think legacy is what you leave. I think it's what you protect while you're still breathing." She stepped into the car, shut the door. Back on Sycamore Lane, a package waited on her porch. No return address. Inside, a single small jar. One of Kelsey's candles. Label peeled off. Wick unused. Attached was a note, written in Greg's handwriting. "I don't want this either. I just didn't know how to stop her." Marilyn lit the candle, let it burn for 30 seconds, then gently extinguished the flame. The courtroom was smaller this time. No cameras, no reporters, just 4 rows of pew benches and the thump of a ceiling fan that refused to settle into rhythm. Marilyn sat alone at the respondent's table, her hands folded neatly over a brown leather handbag. She wore dark green today, the same shade Harold used to call her storm color. Diane was beside her, flipping slowly through case documents, her pen already uncapped. Across the aisle, Greg sat in a suit that didn't quite fit. No Kelsey, not this time. She was home, or hiding, or somewhere rebranding her grief as a wellness journey. Marilyn didn't ask. "Court is now in session," the clerk called. "State of New Mexico versus Gregory Owens, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult?" Greg flinched at the wording. The judge, different from last time, adjusted his glasses and looked over the file. "Mr. Owens, you've waived the right to a jury trial, correct?" Greg nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." Marilyn didn't look at him. She didn't need to anymore. The prosecution laid it out clinically. Power of attorney filed without proper consent, a forged letter from a non-practicing physician, banking withdrawals unaccounted for, a home nearly stripped of ownership through manipulation and gaslighting, all under the pretense of protecting an aging parent. Then Diane stood. "We're not here to humiliate," she said. "We're here to clarify. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a bad idea that went too far. This was methodical. This was calculated, and it only stopped when my client refused to stay quiet." She submitted final documentation, account statements, expert testimony, and a signed affidavit from the neurologist who cleared Marilyn, twice. The judge asked, "Does the respondent wish to make a statement?" Marilyn stood slowly. "Only this." She looked at Greg, eyes calm but carved from granite. "You were given everything, from braces to bailouts, from birthdays to breakdowns. And when it came time to give back, when all I asked for was honesty, you gave me strategy." She didn't wait for permission. She sat down again, dignity intact. The courtroom fell quiet as the judge flipped through the file. Then, "This court finds Mr. Gregory Owens guilty of financial exploitation under New Mexico Statute 3047-1. The court further rules that all restitution, including fraudulent withdrawals and asset interference, be repaid to Ms. Marilyn Owens in full." Greg sagged in his chair. The judge continued, voice measured. "In addition, Kelsey Owens is hereby barred from all legal or financial interest in the Owens estate, now and in perpetuity." Marilyn exhaled. Just once. And finally, the judge concluded, "This court recognizes the integrity and legal soundness of the Harold and Marilyn Owens Charitable Trust. Its terms shall remain sealed and irrevocable. No further challenges will be entertained." Gavel. Done. Diane didn't smile. She didn't have to. Greg stood shakily as the bailiff approached. "I'll turn myself in tomorrow," he whispered. "I need time." The judge glanced down. "You had time. You used it poorly." The bailiff gestured. Greg followed. No cuffs. Not yet. But every step sounded like regret. Marilyn gathered her things without a word. Diane touched her shoulder once, light as a falling leaf. Outside the air was brisk. It smelled like juniper and verdict. On the courthouse steps, a woman in a navy coat was waiting. "Lena." "Aunt Marilyn," she said softly. Marilyn embraced her. "Thank you for coming." "I cleared the back room," Lena said. "The first applicant moves in tomorrow. She used to be a teacher. Lost her home after her son took out loans in her name." Marilyn nodded. "She'll be safe here." They walked together toward the parking lot. At the curb, Marilyn paused and looked back at the courthouse. "For years I thought silence was love," she said. "Turns out love has a louder voice." Lena smiled gently. "And a sharper pen." Marilyn slipped into the passenger seat. As Lena pulled away from the curb, Marilyn's phone buzzed once in her handbag. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. Back home, the porch light was already on. Automatic now, triggered by movement or the fall of dusk. As they approached the house, Marilyn noticed something new tucked into the mailbox. No envelope, just a single photo. Greg, 6 years old, holding a dandelion in one hand. On the back, in blocky pen, "I'm sorry, I miss the wishweed days." She stared at it, then turned it over. On her porch, she stood perfectly still and whispered, "But you blew too hard." The lake didn't speak much. It didn't need to. It shimmered like brushed steel in the morning sun, its surface rippling only when the ducks glided through or when the wind curled its fingers along the shoreline. Marilyn stood on the deck of her small retirement cottage, wrapped in a sky-blue cardigan and holding a mug that said, "Trust no one who says, just trust me." Lena had given it to her, laughing, on her first morning there. It had become a ritual, coffee on the deck, watching the world arrive slowly. The cottage was modest but full of light. One bedroom, a little studio off the back for painting, a kitchen that smelled like rosemary and lemon oil. The walls were lined with artwork. Some were prints, some were hers. Most were unfinished. That was the point. The community here was small and real. No one asked how big your house used to be or if you had kids who called. They talked about books, soup recipes, and the migratory patterns of the blue herons that passed overhead in October. Marilyn taught a watercolor class on Thursdays, not because she was an expert, but because she was curious. She liked the way the color bled into wet paper, never quite following instructions, always blooming where it wanted. She liked that no one tried to own it. Lena visited every Saturday. They didn't call it caretaking. They called it brunch. Lena brought lavender scones and peeled oranges into quarters just the way Marilyn liked. They played cards sometimes, or talked about the women living in the trust house back on Sycamore Lane, how the second applicant had arrived with nothing but a duffel bag and a folder of eviction notices. "She framed her GED last week," Lena had said once, "told me no one ever clapped when she passed anything." So we clapped. Marilyn had smiled, eyes damp but clear. "Then you did something sacred." The old pain didn't echo as often. When it did, it was quieter, like the distant hum of a power line after rain. That afternoon, she opened the cedar box beneath her bed. Inside, only one thing. Greg's photo, the one with the dandelion. Folded note still tucked in back. She took it out slowly, walked outside. The sky was beginning to pinken at the edges, the lake softening to pearl. She crouched by the fire pit and struck a match. The flame caught instantly, curling the paper like it had been waiting. She watched the letter burn until it was nothing but charcoal and guilt. Then she stood. She didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it didn't own her. That night, as the porch light clicked on beside her, Marilyn curled into her reading chair and opened her favorite novel, not for the plot, but because the spine felt good in her hands. Outside, the frogs began their low chorus. Inside, her phone buzzed. Lena again. "New applicant approved. Widow, 64. Kelsey's old age, if she's lucky. Funny how life evens out." Marilyn texted back a heart emoji and set the phone down. Then she lit a candle. Not one from Kelsey's line, just vanilla bean. Cheap. Simple. Real. She stared at the flame for a long time, letting the silence settle over her shoulders like a blanket. Then she whispered, just loud enough to hear herself say it. Silence was their weapon, but peace was mine. Grin. "You know," Carol said, popping the cork with a practiced twist, "most people wait until after the closing date to celebrate." Linda accepted the plastic flute. "I'm not most people." They clinked. For a few minutes they sipped in silence, watching the awkward ballet of furniture removal unfold across the lawn. A bookshelf caught on the porch railing. Erica snapped at the movers again. Carol leaned over. "Does it feel real yet?" Linda exhaled through her nose. "Almost." A soft voice broke the moment. "Grandma?" Linda turned. Nathan's daughter stood at the edge of the porch, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sweatshirt. 14 now. Taller than Linda remembered. Less child, more ache. "Can I say something?" the girl asked, hesitant. Linda nodded. The teen stepped forward, eyes darting between her parents and the moving truck, then back to Linda. I wanted to say thank you for standing up, even if it made everything weird." Linda's throat tightened. "You didn't do anything wrong," the girl added quickly. "They were just mean. Like, quietly mean. But I saw it. And I'm sorry." Linda reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind the girl's ear. "You don't have to be sorry for them." "But I wanted to be like you," she whispered. "You didn't yell. You just held your line." Linda smiled. And for the first time in a long time it reached her eyes. Inside, another thud echoed. Something heavy dropped, followed by muffled cursing. The girl glanced back toward the chaos. "I should go help, but I'm glad you didn't disappear. I'm not going anywhere, Linda said. And she meant it. As her granddaughter walked back inside, Linda opened her notebook, thumbed to a fresh page, and wrote, April 26th. The silence broke. And someone heard. She didn't underline it. She didn't need to. Behind her, Carol raised her flute again. To exits, she said, and better entries. Linda clinked glasses, and this time she drank deep. The hallway sounded different once the house emptied. No low thrum of Erica's blender in the morning, no muffled calls from Nathan's office, always half irritated, half urgent. Just the soft creak of aged wood beneath Linda's feet as she moved slowly through the silence. She paused outside the former guest room, her room, and let her hand skim the doorframe. The grooves in the paint, the tiny chip at the bottom corner, the scratch where she'd once knocked a suitcase against it after Harold's funeral. All those invisible souvenirs of a life lived carefully. The room was nearly bare now, a single chair by the window, a lamp, her notebook. Linda stepped inside and sank into the chair, the late afternoon light casting golden shapes across the carpet. She stared out toward the backyard. The same view she'd had when Harold first parked their car outside this very house, the day Nathan brought them here with shaky pride and keys still warm from the realtor's hand. She remembered how Harold had stepped onto the lawn, squinting up at the eaves. "It's a fixer," he'd said. "But a good one," Linda had replied. He'd nodded, then smiled, that sideways grin he saved for her. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" She had been. They had cashed in 2 CDs, sold the condo, and bet on something bigger than square footage, a future. A belief that family mattered more than independence, that helping your child build their life was worth reshaping your own. That kind of belief came with a cost, and Linda was finally tallying the receipt. Her phone buzzed beside her. "Tricia, just got confirmation. Escrow closed. Funds will be wired to your new condo's trust account tomorrow. You're all set." Linda stared at the screen. Relief didn't rush in. It arrived slowly, like water finding the lowest places. Carol's knock came minutes later, just 2 quick taps, the same rhythm she'd used since college dorms and potluck dinners. "Ready for your victory lap?" she asked, stepping inside with 2 mugs, and a look that didn't expect forced smiles. Linda took the offered cup. "It doesn't feel like victory." Carol sat on the edge of the bed, eyeing the room's emptiness. "Number it rarely does, but it is clarity, and clarity has its own kind of peace." Linda looked around, the air thick with memory. "Do you remember the day we moved in?" "You mean when Nathan made us all take off our shoes before stepping on the new carpet?" Carol smirked. "And Harold tracked in mud anyway?" "He said it wasn't real living unless the floors got dirty." Carol tilted her head. "He'd be proud of you, you know." "I'm not sure," Linda said. "He believed in bridges, in family, no matter how far they strayed." Carol's voice softened. "Sometimes burning a bridge lights your way forward." Linda let that sit in the space between them. She wasn't angry. Not anymore. What she felt now was something far more dangerous to regret. Resolve. "I thought giving up the condo was the cost of peace," Linda said quietly. "But that wasn't peace. That was compliance." "And this?" Linda stood slowly, moved to the window, and looked out one final time. "This is peace, earned, not begged for." They stayed like that for a while, one sitting, one standing, both breathing in the weight of an ending. Then Carol asked, "Want to see the listing for your new place?" Linda turned. "Only if there's room for books and a dog." "There's room for both," Carol said, pulling out her phone. Just as Linda reached for it, the landline in the hallway rang. Old-fashioned, shrill, out of place now. Linda froze. Carol raised a brow. "You expecting a call?" Linda shook her head and walked into the hall, her footsteps echoing off bare walls. She lifted the receiver. A pause. Then, "Mrs. Holloway? This is from county records. There's been a motion filed against the inheritance clause on your deed. We'll need to verify a few things." Linda's grip tightened. Back in the doorway, Carol straightened. Linda met her eyes. "No rest for the resilient," she whispered, and held the line. The envelope was heavy, not just in paperweight, but in intent. Linda laid it on the kitchen table of her temporary rental, a modest but sunlit place with laminate floors and a view of the bay. The coffee steamed beside it, untouched. Across the table sat Carol, eyes sharp behind her glasses, reading glasses perched on her nose, red pen in hand like they were back in community college grading essays. "You really want to include the letter?" Carol asked without looking up. "Yes," Linda said quietly. "Not for the courts. For me." She opened the envelope. Inside were 3 documents: her newly revised will, an addendum marked timeline of financial contributions, and a 1-page letter written in her tightest cursive. Carol pushed the addendum closer, skimming the notes. "You've listed every dollar?" "Down to the penny." Linda nodded. "Tuition deposits, groceries the first year after Harold died, the closing costs from the condo, the landscaping I paid for in spring of 19, every transfer, every receipt." Carol gave a low whistle. "If he tries to challenge this, he'll be shredded before docket call." Linda picked up the letter, her hand pausing before folding it again. "Nathan, you once told me I was the reason you had a future. But lately, it's felt like I became the obstacle you most wanted to forget. This isn't revenge. This is accountability. You don't get to call someone dead weight and still profit from their sacrifices. Love isn't measured by inheritance, but disrespect will never be rewarded." "Mom." Carol tapped the last page. "You sure about the scholarship?" "Yes." "Full amount?" "All of it." Linda walked over to her desk and picked up the brochure Tricia had mailed her. A new local scholarship launching in Harold's name, the H. Holloway Promise Fund, offering first-generation college students a chance to break the same barriers Nathan once needed help crossing. "It'll go further there," she said. Carol smiled. "Harold would have liked that." "I know." They signed the paperwork together. Linda's notary arrived later that afternoon, and by sunset, the files had been scanned, certified, and emailed to the estate attorney handling the final documentation. The next morning, Linda rose early and drove to the county courthouse, just in case. Motion or not, she wanted her paperwork logged. Carol came with her, documents neatly filed in a plastic binder. The clerk took them without comment, only pausing to double-check a page. "Would you like a copy of the public announcement?" the woman asked. "Yes, please," Linda said, "and have it run in both papers. Sunday edition." That afternoon, Linda returned home, made herself a cup of Earl Grey, and opened her window to let the coastal wind move through the room. She placed Harold's old watch on the windowsill, still ticking, and sat in the quiet that didn't ask her to shrink to fit it. The call came late Sunday morning. "Mom?" Nathan's voice was tight. Not angry, not yet, just on the cusp of disbelief. "Yes? What the hell is this? A newspaper? You let me find out through a newspaper?" "I assumed your lawyer would forward it. I gave him the courtesy first." "You're donating my inheritance?" "Your portion, yes." "To strangers?" "To students," she corrected. "You know, like the kind I used to clean hallways to support." There was a pause on his end. Then the familiar shift, the script he always turned to when out of options. "I made mistakes, okay? I know I messed up, but that doesn't mean you get to erase me from the family." Linda let the silence grow roots. "You erased yourself," she said finally. "I just stopped making room." He cursed under his breath. "I'll fight this." "You already tried. Remember the deed?" Silence again. Then the line went dead. Linda didn't flinch. She turned back to her notebook and added a new entry. April 28th. He opened the paper and saw the legacy went elsewhere. Carol walked in from the patio, holding the Sunday edition folded neatly. "You ready for the fallout?" Linda smiled. "I already lived through the worst of it." Carol handed her the paper. Linda didn't look at the headline. She looked at the donation page and saw Harold's name printed in black ink under the words, "Because some inheritances are meant to be earned." She folded the page, tapped it against her palm, and looked up at the sky just as the breeze shifted. "Let him read it," she murmured. "Let the world know." The war wasn't loud, but Linda had already won. The knock came just past 7 p.m., sharp, urgent, the kind that knew it was unwelcome but rang anyway. Linda set down her book, slid her reading glasses to the top of her head, and walked to the front door of her small coastal condo. She didn't need the peephole to know who it was. Something about the weight in the air told her. She opened the door only halfway. Nathan stood on the other side, wrinkled shirt, shadows under his eyes, and the look of someone who had rehearsed his speech in the rearview mirror too many times. His hands were buried in the pockets of his jeans, like they might anchor him in place. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice low. Linda leaned against the doorframe. "You can speak from there." He blinked. "Seriously?" She didn't answer, just waited. Nathan let out a tight breath and rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay, fine." He took half a step back, enough to keep the conversation from feeling like a confrontation, though it still was. I need to say a few things, then I'll go." Linda nodded. "Go ahead." He hesitated, then started with the softer edge. "Look, I know I've made mistakes, a lot of them. Things got messy and I didn't handle it well, but we were under stress. Erica was working long hours. The house was too tight for everyone. I felt stuck between doing right by you and keeping the peace." She tilted her head. "Nathan," he paused, "this is the part where you explain how your circumstances excused your choices." He blinked. "I'm not trying to justify. You are. And I'm listening. Just call it what it is." His jaw tightened. He shifted again. "Fine, I was overwhelmed. But you blindsided me, Mom. Selling the house out from under us, the scholarship, the newspaper. You didn't even talk to me." "I tried," she said gently. "More than once. You weren't listening. You were performing politeness while treating me like a squatter." He opened his mouth, but no words came. "I'm not angry," Linda said, voice steady. "Not anymore. But I am done shrinking to be convenient." Nathan's eyes flashed. "You always said family came first." "I did," she said. "And I meant it. That's why I helped you. That's why I stayed quiet. That's why I let you believe I'd always fold. But I'm your son," he said, louder now, frustration curdling his tone. "You owe me something." "No," she interrupted, calm, final. "I gave you everything, love, support, my home, my savings. What you did with it wasn't my choice, but your failure to care doesn't obligate me to suffer." The words landed like stones. Nathan stood frozen, mouth half open, shoulders squared in defense. The porch light flickered on above them as dusk turned to evening. Linda shifted her weight and added softly, "I don't hate you. I just refuse to participate in your denial anymore." Nathan stared at her, eyes glossy, rage and hurt blending into something sour. "Erica was right," he spat. "You've been waiting for this, some big theatrical payoff." Linda didn't flinch. I was waiting to be heard. When I realized you were never going to listen, I built my own ending." He stared at her a moment longer, then turned and walked down the steps. No goodbye. No thanks. Just silence and scuffed footsteps retreating into the dark. She didn't watch him go, just closed the door with quiet finality and leaned against it for a long breath. Inside, the condo hummed with stillness. She walked back to the table, picked up her pen, and opened her notebook. April 30th. He came for forgiveness, but left empty. She paused, then added a second line. "I am not a door. I do not open for guilt." Outside, a car engine started. Inside, Linda exhaled. Still standing, still whole, still hers. The condo was small, but Linda had chosen every corner of it. The window in the living room faced the bay and caught the sunset around 6:47 p.m. most evenings. The kitchen drawers didn't stick. The neighbors, 2 retired teachers, said hello but never lingered. Peace wasn't loud here. It moved like breath, present, necessary, and quiet. On the second Monday of the month, she brought home a dog. A rescue mutt with wiry tan fur, ears too big for his head, and a tail that thumped uncontrollably whenever someone said, "Good boy." She named him Theo, short for Theory, because he was something new she was trying. The first night, he curled up beside her chair as she painted for the first time in 22 years. She wasn't chasing mastery, just color, shapes, the feel of the brush in her hand and the thrill of messing up without consequence. 1 canvas became 4, then 7. She tacked them to the wall above her writing desk, not to display, but to remember that beauty didn't need permission to exist. On Thursdays, she joined a writing group on Zoom. Carol had suggested it. If you're going to be making history, you might as well write some down. And Linda had agreed. It took her 3 sessions just to unmute herself, but by the 4th, she was reading a short piece titled, "Things I Didn't Say in Real Time." The group clapped, kindly and earnestly. One woman cried, someone asked if it was fiction. Linda just smiled and said, "Parts of it." Healing didn't arrive with banners. It came in careful routines. Early walks with Theo, chamomile tea, learning to nap without guilt. She started grocery shopping with headphones, listening to old jazz and sometimes audiobooks. She spoke softer, not from timidity, but because no one in her life now needed to be shouted over. Then one Sunday afternoon, her doorbell rang. Not urgent, just patient. When she opened it, her granddaughter stood there. Hoodie sleeves pulled over her palms, hair in a messy braid, a shoebox in one hand. Linda stepped aside. "Come in, sweetheart." The girl set the box on the kitchen counter and opened it carefully. Inside, a folded letter sealed in an envelope, a bag of cookies, and a small framed photo. The same one from the broken frame during the move. Nathan, age 4, holding a balloon and sitting on Linda's lap. "I didn't know where else to put it," her granddaughter said, her voice tight. "I saved it." Linda's hand hovered over the frame. "Thank you." The girl hesitated. My dad wrote something. I'm supposed to give it to you." Linda took the envelope but didn't open it. Not right away. Her granddaughter's eyes glistened. "He's not doing great. I think he's trying, but he doesn't know what to do with shame." Linda nodded slowly. "That's not something you fix for him." "I know." Linda reached out and squeezed her hand. "And you don't carry what isn't yours." The girl bit her lip. "Do you hate him?" "No," Linda said. "But I no longer shape myself around him." They sat at the table, drinking warm cider, Theo's tail flicking against the baseboard like a metronome for whatever was being rebuilt. Eventually, the girl asked, "Do you think he'll ever change?" "I think people do what they're willing to work for," Linda said, "and avoid what they're afraid to face." The girl leaned against her. "You're strong." "I'm whole," Linda replied. "That's different." They talked until the sky softened into pink. As her granddaughter left, Linda watched her walk to the bus stop, the letter still on the counter. She made no move to open it. Instead, she reached for her pen and opened her notebook. May 5th. Peace makes no noise. But I can hear it now. She didn't write a second line. But as she returned to the living room, Theo at her heels, she glanced at the photo by the window, Harold's smile captured forever. She whispered, "We're getting there." Then sat down to paint something entirely new. Linda sat at the small kitchen table beneath the bay window, legal pad in front of her, pen uncapped and poised. The morning fog still pressed against the glass, quieting the world like cotton stuffed into the corners of her life. Theo dozed beneath her chair, his breath slow and steady. She had rewritten her will once before, after Harold died. She remembered how surreal it had felt then, naming Nathan as executor, marking the box for sole heir, and scribbling a note in the margins about leaving behind the china set and her pearl earrings, as if those items might anchor the memory of her. Today's edits would not be scribbles. Her attorney had emailed the updated draft that morning. It sat printed beside her tea. She lifted the pen and made her first strike. Beneficiary, Nathan Holloway. One line. A life erased. Flashbacks rose uninvited but vivid. Nathan, age 10, building a fort from couch cushions and insisting she come inside with him. Nathan, 23, hunched over their dining table, shaking as he opened his first rejection letter from a law school he never applied to again. Then, Nathan at 35 saying, "You're kind of dead weight now, Mom. We're doing our best." The pen pressed harder than she intended. She paused, took a breath, and continued. Charitable beneficiaries. H. Holloway Promise Fund, primary. Second Wind Animal Shelter, 50% of life insurance payout. Coastal Women's Art League, Paints and Paper Program. She smiled as she added the last one. Just last week she donated her first finished canvas. an abstract of sunrise in bruise colors. It had been auctioned for $68. Nothing glamorous. But someone had seen it and wanted it. There was one more line left, alternate heir. Name. She wrote, Emery Holloway, granddaughter. Underneath, she printed clearly, should she choose to accept, with no obligation or expectation. The final section was for special provisions. Linda folded her hands. This part was optional, but not to her. The flashbacks rolled again, not as memories but as sensations. The sting of Erica's passive notes on the fridge, the sound of her own voice quieting during dinner, the ache of setting a table for people who pretended she didn't eat. She picked up the pen one last time and wrote, no descendant who ever referred to me as dead weight, verbally, digitally, or in writing, shall inherit any portion of my estate, property, or named insurance. This clause shall not be contestable, regardless of future relationship, reconciliation, or time past. She underlined not be contestable twice. The fog outside had begun to lift, peeling back into soft gray streaks. Light filtered through the glass and landed on her hands. They looked older than she felt, but steadier too. The doorbell rang. Not loud, just once. A familiar rhythm. Carol entered without waiting for permission, holding 2 cinnamon rolls from their favorite cafe and a thermos of black coffee. I brought fuel, she said, spotting the documents on the table. Are we legalizing vengeance or peace today? Both, Linda said, depending on where you sit. Carol laughed and handed her a roll. You look like someone who just made history. No, Linda replied. I just made sure history won't repeat itself. Carol sat across from her and pointed to the final clause. That's new. Closure needs teeth, Linda said, or people chew through it. They ate in a silence filled with ease. Afterward, Linda placed the signed papers back into their envelope, sealed it, and tucked it into the filing drawer beneath Harold's old watch. Her notebook lay nearby, still open. She picked up her pen and wrote, May 10th. My legacy no longer lives in silence. It lives in ink. She didn't wait for a second line. But as she turned to the next page, the doorbell rang again. Theo barked softly. Linda stood, and this time, she opened the door all the way. The house was on the market, but Linda didn't go to the open house. She didn't have to. Instead, she sat on the boardwalk 2 blocks from the bluff and watched the ocean move like breath. Theo sat beside her, leashed loosely to the bench leg, ears perked at passing joggers and the occasional skater. The salty air tugged at the loose strands of her hair, and the foam on her cappuccino had long since collapsed into a warm, bittersweet puddle. Carol's voice crackled through her phone. You good? Linda smiled faintly, eyes still fixed on the shifting blue horizon. I'm finally home. She didn't mean the condo, or the coast. She meant her body, her name, her life. Across town, strangers were walking through the home she once helped buy with a check she never got back. A realtor with a too-white smile pointed at features she'd once fought to keep, crown molding, built-ins, the oak flooring she'd picked herself in aisle 17 of Lowe's. Somewhere inside, the bathroom still had the faint scent of lavender tile cleaner. Someone might fall in love with it. That would be fine. It was just a house now. She rose, brushing toast crumbs from her cardigan, and walked home with Theo trotting beside her. That evening she dressed slowly, soft navy slacks, a pearl button blouse, a blazer in charcoal gray, simple earrings, a spritz of her old rosewater perfume, not out of nostalgia, but because she could. The gala was at the art museum downtown, quiet, elegant, understated. A soft jazz trio played in one corner beneath warm lighting. Linen-covered tables bore tiny plaques with donor names, and Linda's was carved next to Harold's, the Holloway Promise Fund, in honor of growth over inheritance, the theme of the night, first chances, second starts. As guests arrived, Linda didn't make speeches or draw eyes. She didn't need to. Her name was printed in the program, in the scholarship roster, in the hallway beside the framed portrait of Harold that Emery had taken from her iPhone and submitted without telling anyone. He was laughing in it, real and alive in a way he hadn't been for years before he died. Linda stood beside it for a moment, glass of water in hand. "You're the one," a voice said behind her. She turned. A girl, maybe 19, maybe younger, stood in a plain black dress with calloused hands and eyes that had seen too much too soon. "I got your scholarship," the girl said. "I didn't know if you'd be here." Linda's throat tightened. "I'm here." The girl stepped forward and hugged her. Tight, sudden, as if she'd been carrying something she couldn't name until this moment made it real. "Your gift changed everything," the girl whispered. "Everything." Linda's hand trembled as she reached up and returned the hug, gentle and brief. After the girl left, Carol found her at the buffet. "You okay?" she asked. Linda nodded. "I used to dream of applause. Turns out I just needed silence and someone to say thank you without being told to." They stood side by side, watching the crowd mill, under crystal lights. A man approached Carol with a tray of wine and flirtation. She winked at Linda, took a glass, and let herself be led to a table with music and laughter. Linda wandered to a quiet spot by the balcony. Below, the city shimmered. New buildings blinked with promise. Somewhere out there, Nathan might still be nursing grudges like scotch. But it didn't matter now. The world no longer shrank to hold him. Linda stepped out into the cool night air and opened her notebook beneath the moonlight. May 15th. Legacy isn't what we leave, it's what we free. She closed the cover. Inside, the jazz trio played a few bars of something soft and hopeful. And outside, Linda exhaled. No bitterness, no sting, only air, only breath, only beginning. Mornings came easier now. Linda no longer woke to the weight of silence, but to the ease of it. Her small condo had grown into its rhythm, clean lines, quiet corners, and a steady heartbeat set by Theo's tail thumping against the kitchen cabinet whenever she brewed her first cup of tea. There were no voices to dodge, no footsteps stomping through her choices, no sticky notes with suggestions masked as orders, just her breath, and the vast stretch of possibility disguised as another sunrise. Closure, she had learned, wasn't a moment, it was a season. And this one had ripened slowly. She'd started a new canvas that morning, brushstrokes wide and loose, the kind that didn't ask permission from perfection. There was a soft yellow at the bottom, lifting into blues that reminded her of the house on its best days. She didn't know yet what it would become. That was the point. Her granddaughter visited every other Saturday. They didn't talk about Nathan much. Sometimes Emery mentioned how school was going or how the apartment felt less tense, with only one parent pacing the halls. She once asked if she could bring Theo home for a weekend. Linda had gently said no. Not out of spite, but out of protection, for them both. They baked once. Emery burned the first batch of cookies and laughed until she snorted. Linda had laughed too, loudly. The kind of laugh that took years off and weight off and something else off too, like armor finally no longer needed. Some nights, Linda walked to the overlook past the boardwalk, carrying a small, woven bag filled with pieces of her former life, things that weren't worth keeping, but too full of memory to trash. She'd been chipping away at it piece by piece. Tonight, she brought the last one. Her old house keys, 4 of them on a brass ring, slightly rusted, worn smooth from years of turning locks that never truly opened anything for her. The breeze off the ocean was cool but not cold. Theo sat beside her, head tilted toward the waves as if listening for something ancient and familiar. Linda held the keys in her palm for a moment. She thought of Harold, how he'd gripped her hand during house tours, how he'd insisted on installing the storm door himself, even though he hadn't held a drill properly since the Reagan administration. She thought of the nights they'd sat on the back porch, dreaming of a future for their son, a future he'd claimed, and then closed the door behind. She thought of betrayal, not like a knife, but like erosion, how slow dismissal had worn her down more thoroughly than any scream ever could, and how finally setting a boundary had been louder than any shout she could have managed. And still, she had found joy on the other side. She tightened her fingers around the keys, then opened her hand over the railing and let them go. They made a small sound against the sea, a plink swallowed instantly by the tide. No fanfare, no applause, just the sound of something ending, and the peace that followed it, As she turned to go, her phone buzzed. A voicemail waited. She listened as the wind curled around her. "Hi, Ms. Holloway. This is Tara from Hargrove and Bennett. Just confirming that as of today the estate is officially closed. All filings are complete. You are, by every legal and financial definition, free." The word hung in her ear like music. Free. Linda smiled. Back home, she fed Theo, turned on the kettle, and slipped her painting back onto the easel. She added one more line of gold, light, breaking through the blue. Then opened her notebook and wrote the final line, May 31st, I was dead weight, to the wrong people. She let the pen rest beside the page. Outside, the waves kept moving, soft and steady, like breath. And inside, Linda exhaled. Not relief, not regret, just peace. Bought in full.